Are you ready? You think you could tell us what to do? You think you could tell us what to wear? You think that you're better? Well, you better get ready. Bow to the masters. Break it down!
Hi, welcome to the Straight Lions Talk Podcast 2016 Free Agent Edition. That's right, Lions fans. The free agent period is here for the NFL and the Detroit Lions. We will be covering that today almost exclusively. We'll also get into the announcement that Calvin Johnson has officially retired from the NFL and the Detroit Lions. But first of all, we'd like to thank everybody out there for joining the show. We really appreciate it. We've had our best responses over the last 4 weeks has been phenomenal for us. The way we bring this show to you and the amount of money we have to spend on advertising, it's been phenomenal. We've been getting about 200 views per show. We really appreciate it. It's so phenomenal. This is getting to where we want it to be. We want to be the Lions information center for everything Detroit Lions. And we want to give you guys that information on a weekly basis. And you guys are helping us with that by getting the show out there. We really appreciate it. You can find us on a variety of different formats. The easiest way to find us and the best way to find us is on Twitter. We're at STR Lions Talk Podcast on Twitter. We're on iTunes, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we're on Stitcher. We're on Spreaker. You can follow us at a variety of different formats, and all of those can be found at STR Lions Talk Podcast. You can find us there. If you like us on iTunes or you like us on Stitcher, please subscribe to the show, leave us a rating, leave us a comment, tell us how we're doing. If it's a 1-star, then give us a 1-star. If it's a 5-star, give us a 5-star. Whatever it is, please give us that rating because that just lets us know where we're at with you, the Lions fan. Are we bringing you guys the best information? Leave us a rating on Twitter whether you like the show. Great show, bad show, you're an idiot, whatever it is. Just give us a rating, give us a follow. And we'll comment. We usually have tweet of the day. There wasn't a whole bunch of great questions this week. There are more responses than questions. So if you guys have a question, leave it for us, and we'll read it on the show, and we'll answer that question. We can also, please, subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. That way it automatically gets loaded up into your file, and you guys don't have to wait for the show to be tweeted to you. We tweet the show out to all of our followers every week. Individually, we tweet out every single person that follows Straight Lions Talk. We tweet the show out to you to give you guys the easiest access to the show. But if you want an easier show, whether you use an Android or an iPhone or whatever your phone choice is, just subscribe to whatever format fits your phone, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's iTunes, whatever it is, you can upload it into your phone automatically when you subscribe to us. So please subscribe to us, leave us a rating, let us know how we're doing on whatever format you want to use. Today we're going to be start talking about the retirement of Calvin Johnson. Yes, it's finally been announced. The Detroit Lions wide receiver, the 9-year vet, the all-pro, the all-everything, great receiver of the Detroit Lions, is officially retiring from the Detroit Lions and the NFL. It's real. It wasn't a play that he was trying to make to get on another team. It wasn't a play to get more money to restructure his deal. He's done. And it's too bad because I think there's a lot of football left in him. He was a unique talent, a generational talent, someone that isn't going to come along every day. He's in the same breath as a Barry Sanders, someone that you think you're going to see. I always thought we would see another Barry Sanders or someone that really resembles Barry Sanders, and since I've been around football and seen Barry Sanders, I saw him from his rookie year to he retired, and all football after that, I've not seen a running back that resembles Barry Sanders in his style of running. They try to make LaShawn McCoy that, but he's really not. But Calvin Johnson, I mean, you can compare him to Randy Moss, but he's bigger than Randy Moss. You can try to compare him to Terrell Owens, but he's faster and can high point balls better than Terrell Owens. So you can compare him to a lot of different receivers, but in his own self, he's very unique and a once-in-a-generation receiver for the Detroit Lions. It's something that wish we could have appreciated more, and I wish we could have gotten to more playoff games and had playoff victories and made more runs to the playoffs, why Calvin Johnson was here in Detroit, because it's a player that you draft at the right time. Can you imagine if like the Patriots drafted him right now, what the Patriots offense would be with Edelman, Gronk, Deion Lewis, and all those other guys they have on their team? Can you imagine how dangerous that team would be if a player of Calvin Johnson's caliber came out in the draft right now and was able to be on the New England Patriots, the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, teams like that, well-run organizations? He just came to the Lions in the worst time ever. The Matt Millen era is probably one of the only great Matt Millen picks that the Detroit Lions were able to see under the Matt Millen regime. So having Calvin here was phenomenal for the 9 years he was here. 1,900-yard season, one of the most dominant receivers in the league, a physical freak. His ability to be able to high point balls, be triple covered. I mean, he's the only receiver I remember being legitimately covered, double teamed, consistently throughout a game. Teams were just literally taking two people and putting him on Calvin Johnson because he was so unstoppable. And that's a credit to him. It's a credit to the Lions for having the wherewithal at that time to draft a player like Calvin Johnson, with all the negativity around the Lions for drafting receivers and having failures, for having the guts to take that receiver when you've had failures in the top 10 of the draft at the receiver position, Mike Williams and Charles Rogers under the Matt Millen era. So you have to kind of give Matt Millen a little credit. I guess everyone gets lucky once in a while, and he got lucky on Calvin Johnson, but it was kind of a no-brainer. It wasn't like it was a real hard choice to make. He was by far the best receiver in that class and one of the best players in that draft. So having Calvin with the Detroit Lions has been an up-and-down roller coaster. Early in his career, he didn't have the health issues and some of the injury problems he had later on in his career, and he was so dynamic and so dominant. It was just a physical freak for that period of time. From 2007 till now, he's been number one in yards, receptions, touchdowns, all the top receiver categories. He's been the number one guy. And a lot of people are going to ask, is Calvin Johnson a Hall of Famer? And I'm going to say something that's really unpopular and something that a lot of Lions fans have heard me say, and a lot of Lions fans probably think I'm saying just to get a response, and I'm not. I do not believe Calvin Johnson is a Hall of Famer, and here's why. It's the Hall of Fame, not the Hall of If. It's not the Hall of if Calvin Johnson would have played more, he would have had better stats. If Calvin Johnson would have been drafted by another organization, he would have maybe had a Super Bowl ring or had better stats. If Calvin Johnson would have went to a team that had a better quarterback when he was younger, he would have been better. It's not the Hall of If, it's the Hall of Fame. There has to be a threshold for that highest honor in the NFL, and receiver anyway is really hard to get in. Terrell Owens didn't get in this year, and Terrell Owens is number 2, number 5, and number 3 in like all the major receiver categories all time. And Calvin Johnson isn't even in the top 20 of any of those categories. His highest ranking is 22nd, and I believe it's for receptions. He's like 27th in yards and 55th in touchdowns. So you can't really put him in the Hall of Fame. Now, I will back that up by saying if it would have been a catastrophic event that held Calvin Johnson back from, prolonging his career, let's say he would have gotten in a car accident and injured severely, or gotten in a car accident and died, or if he would have been injured on the field like Mike Utley or something, and he would have not been able to continue his career due to those circumstances, then yes, I believe he would be a Hall of Famer. But deciding to leave the game because you don't want to play anymore because you're tired of being injured and you want to be able to have a better life in your later years is not Hall of Fame worthy in my book. I think he's a Lions Hall of Famer all day. I think the Lions should retire his number next year for sure, have a huge ceremony. That number should never be worn by anyone. It should be up in the Lions Ring of Fame or Lions Den of Fame or whatever they call it. I just don't believe he's a Hall of Fame candidate with the numbers he's put up. And I know everyone's going to say, if he would have stayed, if this, if that. Again, it's not the Hall of If, it's the Hall of Fame. And that's my argument. I just don't think the body of work is there. I think he needed a few more years. You don't have the playoff victories to back up any of that. He wasn't a prime time. The Lions weren't a prime time team for a long time. They had a Thanksgiving Day game, and that was basically the only time the whole nation was able to see Calvin Johnson at one particular time slot. We weren't on Monday Night Football a lot. We weren't on Thursday Night Football. We didn't make a lot of runs in the playoffs or even make a run to get into the playoffs for a long time under Calvin Johnson. I mean, he was part of the 0-16 team. Was that his fault? No, but that still has to be taken into context when you talk about putting him in the Hall of Fame. And, I don't think Michael Irvin's a Hall of Famer, but he can take 3 Super Bowl rings and slide them across the table, just like Troy Aikman. I don't believe Troy Aikman's a Hall of Famer. He can take 3 Super Bowl rings and slide them across the table. There's a lot of guys I don't think are legit Hall of Famers, but you remember them for their big moments in the playoffs. You remember Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman throwing touchdowns in the Super Bowl, all 3 of them. You remember Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman playing the 49ers, the Green Bay Packers in those epic playoff games that were so down to the wire, making huge plays, being the heart and soul. Flamboyant was Michael Irvin. And everything he did, he'd make a play and tell you about it. He came across well on TV. Whatever his off-the-field issues are, fine. But he did get those Super Bowl rings. For Calvin Johnson, didn't get a playoff victory. Only 2 playoff appearances. Again, not his fault. But you still have to put that into the pie when you're talking about whether or not Calvin Johnson is a Hall of Famer. And in my book, he's not a Hall of Famer. Great Lion. All-time great Lion. One of the best Lions we've ever had. Besides Barry Sanders, he's probably 2. So where do you rank him? Wide receiver wise, all time. Well, the stats tell you he's in the mid-20s, 25-ish, just stat wise. Obviously, that is different. And I know we all have an affinity for Calvin Johnson because he played here. So we're naturally going to think, hey, he's a Hall of Famer. I've mentioned it on Twitter once. Man, the F words were flying. People were calling me stupid. I didn't know anything. You're an idiot. That's great. And if that's the way you guys feel, please tweet me at STR Lions Talk and let us know how you feel about this. How do you really feel? Do you really think he's a Hall of Famer? I don't. I'm not saying that to be controversial, like I said. It's just the way I feel. I don't think he has a big enough body of work. He doesn't have playoff victories, Super Bowl rings. And again, none of that's really his fault. He's played for a terrible organization that was poorly run. Again, not his fault, but still. He had a huge contract. He has a cool nickname in Megatron. He is and was very dominant. And for a 3-4 year stretch there, he was the best receiver in the league. And teams had to really stress about how they were going to defend. And at times, he was undefendable. And that's a credit to Calvin Johnson. But after the 1,900-yard season, and he signed the huge contract, that was kind of his high point, and he really never lived back up to that. That was kind of the descent of Calvin Johnson. That was his high water mark, and he's been descending ever since, whether it's health issues, whatever it is. He didn't practice a lot. I just don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's an all-time great Lion. They should retire his jersey possibly this year, Week 8. If he's 100% sure he's not coming back, throw his jersey up in the rafters, have a big ceremony, make it Calvin Johnson Day, give out bobbleheads or whatever you got to do, jerseys to all the fans, and make it a huge Calvin Johnson Day. No one should ever wear 81 again, ever, no matter what the circumstances. It should never be worn, just like Barry Sanders, number 20. It should never be worn. He's a great Lion, all-time great Lion. I love it. But I can't justify saying he's a Hall of Famer. I can't get my head around it. I know he's not going to be first ballot. I know a lot of people are banging the table he's first ballot. But take off your helmet for a minute and take off your jersey and really think about it. He's really not, because T.O. didn't get in. Marvin Harrison didn't get in. And their body of work was better. Super Bowl rings, except T.O. But when T.O. went to Philadelphia, he was actually that missing piece. He was one of those receivers that made the team better around him. And when he got in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, coming off an injury when he's sleeping in hyperbaric chambers, he was the best player on the field that day. The Patriots couldn't stop him. They had a really good defense then, too, and they could not figure a way to stop him. in that game. But Terrell Owens made the Philadelphia Eagles a deadly, dangerous team where Calvin Johnson made the Lions a deadly, dangerous team at times, but he wasn't the difference maker in wins. By Calvin Johnson not being back for the Lions this year is not a game. Their odds in Vegas are not going to change because Calvin Johnson isn't there. So what do the Lions do next? Now that Calvin Johnson's gone, what do the Lions do next? And that's where free agency comes into effect, and the draft and everything. Bob Quinn is here now to save the Lions, and I believe he's going to. I think Bob Quinn has come at the perfect time in the Lions organization. Matthew Stafford, 2 more years on his contract. I believe Matthew Stafford is going to be the quarterback of the future for the Detroit Lions for the long haul. If I were the Detroit Lions, I would be extending Matthew Stafford's contract now. Have you guys seen the money that's being spent in free agency in this last day? The money players are getting. Janoris Jenkins, $62 million. Can you imagine what Darius Slay's going to command? Ezekiel Ansah, did you see what Malik Jackson got? $90 million. Ziggy's going to be in the Ndamukong Suh range next year. $120 million player if they don't try to lock him up before next year and their back's against the wall. I don't think Quinn's going to panic, but these are some issues the Lions should address. And that's where we want to start. We want to start with our own team first. The Detroit Lions lost Isa Kadus to the Miami Dolphins. Of course, the Miami Dolphins seem to sign every Lions secondary guy now, and they seem to sign a lot of Lions. They're talking about signing Jason Jones. They signed Sue. I don't know what's going on down there, but they seem to just have money going everywhere. Either the Dolphins are the greatest cap strategy organization in the NFL, or in 2 years they're going to be so cap strapped it's not even going to be funny, and they're going to look like an expansion team, and they're going to have to get rid of Sue because they already had to restructure Sue 1 year into his multi-million-dollar deal. So, the Lions losing Kadus. Okay, they did sign another safety, a Patriot, to a contract here this week, and I don't mind Kadus leaving. I think that the money he got, the 2 years for $12 million or 3 years for $12 million, was a little high for him, and I understand why he left. And I think Quinn felt that there were better options for that money that had a better skill set than Kadus. I mean, Eric Weddle could be an option for the Detroit Lions at this point. We lost out on George Iloka. I was really excited about getting him. I was hoping we were able to pull the trigger on that. He re-signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. He re-signed with his former team, his current team, I should say. I was really hoping to get him. I thought that the Lions would benefit them greatly, having a player of his caliber in the secondary next to Quinn. But Bob Quinn, I got to give him credit. In this free agent period, he hasn't been real hasty with the money, and we'll get into that in just a second. But some of the other players, I'd like to see Darius Slay locked up. I mean, Janoris Jenkins, 5 years, $62 million. If Darius Slay continues on the upward track where he's going, and the way he played last year, and he comes into next year, and keeps climbing up the ladder of elite cornerbacks, and he comes out and he picks off 10 balls next year. Again, he's going to be an $80 million player potentially. He could be in the realm of $12 to $16 million. Darrelle Revis is getting $16 million. How do you know that they're not going to be trying to get Darrelle Revis type money for Darius Slay next year when the cap expands again? Ezekiel Ansah, more than likely going to command a huge dollar. And the keys to building a team, like we've went over before, is to have a number one receiver, number one quarterback, number one left tackle, number one cornerback, number one D end. They have all of that, but probably the left tackle. Riley Reiff is probably the best tackle in the NFC, which isn't bragging, but he is probably the best one in the NFC. He's the best one in our division. Maybe the Packers left tackle is probably right there, even tied. But Riley Reiff's not terrible. He's not elite, and that's maybe an area the Lions need to address, whether it be the draft or free agency, but this is probably not the year to do it because both those areas are not deep in the draft and or free agency. Okun's out there, but he's injured a lot. He's going to cost a ton of money. Something I don't think the Lions are going to spend on a left tackle is just a Scrooge McDuck amount of money for a left tackle. But having Bob Quinn extend Slay, Ziggy Ansah, Devin Taylor possibly, extend possibly Matthew Stafford, so you don't have to pay an exorbitant amount of money for Matthew Stafford. Did anyone see what Brock freaking Osweiler got? Are you kidding me? 4 years, $76 million? I understand how the contract, they don't get all that, and I understand all of that. I get it. But that amount of money and the cap hit that comes with that, if he fails, is phenomenal. You don't think if Matthew Stafford hit the market, he would double Brock Osweiler's amount? If Matthew Stafford was in this free agent class, people have to realize he's 28. He's the same age as Colin Kaepernick. He's the same age. I mean, Brock Osweiler's 25, and he started 6 games. Matthew Stafford started 8 seasons worth of games. So what are we doing here? I mean, let's extend Stafford. Let's try to get a deal, a cap-friendly deal, because Bob Quinn being there now, I think, is going to be the best thing that happened to Matthew Stafford. He's going to build a real team around him with a real offensive line, with real depth, where losing a player isn't going to be detrimental to the Detroit Lions, where, you lose DeAndre Levy and people are like, oh, well, next year our defense will be good because we have Levy back. Well, why do we always have to be bad if we lose one player? I don't get it. I mean, our whole team, as long as I've been a Lions fan, everyone always makes an excuse why we're bad. Well, Calvin Johnson was out. Or, DeAndre Levy was out. That's why the defense gave up 24 points instead of 16 that year. Really? I don't think DeAndre Levy's 8 points worth of good. He's a good player, but I don't think he meant that much. And other teams lose key players. The Patriots lose key players. The Steelers lose key players. The Packers lose key players, and they seem to just click right along. They plug the next guy in. And I think that's what Bob Quinn, I know that's what Bob Quinn's doing now. With the people he surrounded himself with, which I said Ken O'Brien last week on the show, which was a mistake. That was the quarterback of the Jets. It's Kyle O'Brien, his right-hand man, formed what I think is a great team shaping up down in Jacksonville. I love their drafts. I love the players they have on their roster, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And the model of player they want to bring in to fit their player profiles is something I really like. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the cusp of being a really, really good football team. I think Blake Bortles is ready to pop. I think they have a phenomenal running game. I think a lot of positive things about the Jacksonville Jaguars. You can laugh all you want, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be a very good team. Jacksonville, you're an idiot. Well, they've made a lot of key signings. They have a lot of good draft picks. And that's the type of player we're going to go after in free agency. And we've went after one of those players, the wide receiver. We've signed Marvin Jones. Can you guys believe we signed Marvin Jones, probably the number one receiver in the free agent group of receivers? The Detroit Lions signed yesterday Marvin Jones from the Cincinnati Bengals to a 5-year, $40 million contract. Now, we overpaid just a little bit, but in this market, everyone's overpaying. It's what you do in free agency. You overpay. You're not going to get him for $3 million a year. I think it's a great signing. He offers a lot of different features to the Lions wide receiving core, that just had basically Golden Tate and T.J. Jones and Eric Ebron and Corey Fuller, but Corey Fuller. It's a great signing by the Detroit Lions to get Marvin Jones. It was a shock to me. I didn't think the Detroit Lions, we said last week, watch out in this free agent period, that Bob Quinn is not going to have big eyes in this free agent period. Something guys have to realize, and most men out there, and we can all be stereotyped into this group, myself included, is we're visual beasts. We look at something and we love it. We look at it, we're like, wow, look at that. That is so cool. Look at him. He's so good. He's so this. He's so that. The hot ticket item. We walk into a store and, flashy. We learn better with our eyes than we do. We're visual learners. We're visual animals. And Bob Quinn hasn't fallen into that trap of being a visual animal. I mean, go back to when you met your wife, or you meet your girlfriend, or a girl in general, or whoever it is, or whatever it may be. But when you meet your wife, I don't think you were sitting there eating dinner and you heard some woman speaking like, wow, that woman is so intellectual, and she has such a calm to her voice, and I just really deeply want to meet this woman. No, You look at the girl you want to go up and talk to, or some girl you may like, or you have a crush on. You look at her. The reason you have that crush is the visual look of that person. You look through your eyes. You're a visual learner. You're a visual beast, just like every man is, because that's what we are. We're visual animals. And you see your wife, it's not, it's for her features of her body. You look on, how pretty her face is, her hair, whatever your thing is, that, whatever your attraction is to a woman, that's what you focus on. Whatever it may be, whatever fetish it is, whatever it is, that's what you focus on as a man. And you have to give Bob Quinn credit because he didn't fall in love with Malik Jackson. Last time we saw him was in the Super Bowl, dominating the Super Bowl. You could easily say Malik Jackson had just as much effect on that game and Derek Wolfe as Von Miller. Von Miller had the flashy sacks, but Malik Jackson was a physically dominating force in that game, and he was throughout the playoffs, noticeably dominant, an Ndamukong Suh type of dominance. He was very dominant and very consistent throughout the playoffs. He's a young guy, second contract, a lot of football ahead of him if he can stay healthy. And he scored huge in free agency. And you have to give Quinn credit because we had $41 million or $42 million to play with. He didn't go out and spend it all on one player or two players. He didn't do what the Giants have done or the Philadelphia Eagles have done and just been huge buyers on the free agent market. No, patience, very patient, very methodical. Taking a scout's approach. We've talked about it before. Bob Quinn is going to take a scout's approach to these acquisitions to the Detroit Lions. It's not going to be like it was when Mayhew was there and we get the flashy player and we were always in the news for this player, that player, whatever the big name player was. That's not the case. The Patriots barely signed anybody yesterday. Packers didn't, I don't think, signed anybody. Steelers hardly signed anybody. Those organizations, the Ravens didn't really go out and spend a ton of money on anybody. They let someone go because they're in cap trouble. They were trying to make a push for a Super Bowl, got in a little cap trouble. That's fine. That's where you'll see Quinn spend money. When we're a couple players away, you'll see Quinn spend money. At this point, he's trying to build depth on this team. And I think he did a good job by getting Marvin Jones. Again, a player, a sound player, productive in the league, understands the league, good family man, good football player. Is he going to be Calvin Johnson? No. And we're not trying to replace Calvin Johnson. We talked about that. We don't want to try to replace Calvin Johnson. That's the biggest mistake the Lions could make, is trying to go out and get a 6'5", 230-pound receiver to be a threat in the red zone. No. Go out in free agency, like we talked about last week. The key positions we wanted to address in free agency were wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, and secondary. Those are the positions we wanted to address in free agency because we feel those positions need veteran help. And Bob Quinn so far has been addressing those needs in free agency with the Detroit Lions. By getting Marvin Jones, a player I didn't think we were going to have a shot at because I heard his price was coming up so high, and I didn't think Bob Quinn, remember, a former Patriot front office personnel guy, and the Patriots do not spend money on wide receivers. But like we said before, I'm sure there's a lot of things Bob Quinn liked about Bill Belichick and the format and the foundation and the team and the organization he has built in New England throughout his time in New England. I think that's commendable. I think he's learned a lot of valuable lessons in scouting and how to look at players and how to look at positions and everything that goes into it. I just don't think he always agreed with Bill Belichick's ways. I mean, I'm sure there's times he's like, oh man, talking to some of his colleagues when Bill's not around, man, we could really use an outside receiver. And that's not the case with the Lions. We didn't go cheap with it. We didn't try to get someone that is past their prime, and Andre Johnson, someone like that. No, we went for a guy that still has a lot of life left in his legs, a lot of game left, and I think is on the rise and will be able to show what he can actually do without A.J. Green being there, Mohamed Sanu, Tyler Eifert, Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard in the backfield. All those weapons they had on the offensive side of the ball are going to be not there in Detroit. You're going to deal with possibly, hopefully, Eric Ebron, Theo Riddick, Amir Abdullah, and Golden Tate. I think the opportunities are going to be there for him. He's a good receiver when yards after the catch. He can run the whole route tree. He has the ability to get deep, knows how to play the receiver position with his body, which is key. He's just not a speed guy. He can do a lot of different things. And like we said before, this is where we think the league's going, is having guys that can do a lot of different things from the wide receiver position. Not just a one-trick pony. Now, are those guys valuable? Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting Mike Wallace at this point for the wide receiver position. We really wanted Victor Cruz. I really thought having Victor Cruz on the Detroit Lions, a healthy Victor Cruz coming into the Detroit Lions, having a season off, trying to prove something, a good player coming in on a bad season is a good thing to have, not a average player coming off a great season. You don't want to sign him. You want it to be the other way around. A good player coming off a bad season with a lot of football left in front of him, and that's Victor Cruz. He showed it last year. He was injured, but having Victor Cruz would have been key. Re-signed with the Giants, so we don't have to worry about that. You know, getting a Mike Wallace, you could probably get him cheap, and having the ability for Mike Wallace to get deep, and I think Mike Wallace is limited on some of the things he can do, but if you could use him in the way the Pittsburgh Steelers did, having a big arm quarterback like Matthew Stafford, where in certain situations, maybe 5-6 times a game, you just throw deep to him. And that's just the play. You're throwing deep to Mike Wallace in certain plays. You're trying to set a defense up. That's what the Steelers did, and that's what the Dolphins couldn't do, and that's sure as heck what stinking Teddy Bridgewater, check down Teddy, couldn't do. So I'd like to see us get Mike Wallace. I really wanted to get Rashad Matthews out of Miami. Again, signed with the Titans, I believe, so that's not an option. Ruben Randall's still out there. Couple other guys. I think they'll make another move for a receiver. I'm sure they're going to address it in the draft, but like I said, this draft is not deep in receiver. It's top-heavy at receiver if you want to count Laquan Treadwell, which I'm not a huge fan of, and I don't believe Bob Quinn's going to take receiver. Josh Doxson would be our choice for receiver in the draft if they went that route. But getting Marvin Jones is a great get for the Detroit Lions. It really helps out everything they want to do on the offensive side of the ball and gives Matthew Stafford a weapon that he can be versatile with. It's like having another Golden Tate on the other side. He's just a little taller, and he's able to stretch the field a little bit and win on a few high point balls. He's not Calvin Johnson, like I said. This isn't going to be the days of throw it up with 3 guys on him and just hope he catches it. Now, that's not Marvin Jones's game, but his game is very good, and I think he's on the rise, just like Golden Tate was when he came to Detroit from Seattle. Another guy the Detroit Lions signed was Tavon Wilson, safety, Patriots. Now, we said that Bob Quinn would copy the Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick model and bring in Patriots to help formulate his plan on the field for the Detroit Lions, the way Bill Parcells did and the way Bill Belichick did. It's kind of a staple of what they do. A lot of the big-time coaches get these players that fall in love with them. They want to follow them around everywhere, and that's a credit to their coaching. But I didn't really think it would be Trayvon Wilson. He didn't play. I think he played 87 snaps last year. He's a player, and I like the acquisition, to be truthful. Again, it's depth. And I think if we do not sign a free agent safety in this free agent period, a starting safety, I really believe Bob Quinn feels comfortable having Trayvon Wilson start. Now, I think the Detroit Lions need to draft a safety. There are some safeties in this draft. We've Carl Joseph out of West Virginia. Vaughn Bell out of Ohio State could be an option for the Detroit Lions. I really think he's going to go in the first round. Vaughn Bell, that is. Carl Joseph coming off an injury last year. Is he healthy? I wouldn't go in the second round to get him. I think he's more of a fourth-round player, Joseph, that is. I personally really like Sean Davis, and the Lions liked him a lot at the Combine. He's a Randy Edsall guy at Maryland. Edsall recruited him to Maryland. He can play a variety of different positions. But his primary position is the safety position. I think that's where he's better suited. But like we talked about in our draft show and some of the other times we talked about it, I think Sean Davis in the third round, he's flying up boards. He did a very good job at the Combine, showed out very well, showed his versatility and a lot of the different things he could do, tested very well. Analytically, he'll be very high on the Lions board, and I think having a personal relationship with Randy Edsall and Randy Edsall being with the Detroit Lions will actually help the Detroit Lions decide whether they should attack him in the third round or is he worth just trying to wait out and see if you can get him in the fifth round. Right now they have him projected between the fourth and fifth round from what I have seen, and I believe that's kind of where he sits right now, but I could see him moving up boards because he is that good of a player. That, like I said before, like we said here, we've mentioned 100,000 times, versatility at the wide receiver position and at the safety positions is the new NFL. Quicker than fast. That's what everything's going to come down to now in the NFL. The big galloping wide receiver running down the middle of the field. I think those days are going to. I think those players have a place, but it's not like it was. That's not going to be what teams are looking for. They're going to be looking for the Marvin Joneses, the Sterling Shepards out of Oklahoma, the the Golden Tates, the Antonio Browns, the guys like that, those type of receivers, Brandon Cooks, guys like that can come in and do a multitude of different things, play from the slot, play the outside, play the strong side, play the weak side of the field, go against the number one cornerback. Whatever they need to do, they can do. They can get deep. They can run the whole route tree, come in and out of their breaks at the same speed. They come in and out of their breaks at the same speed they start. There's no interruption in their speed along the route tree. That's what the league is coming to. I think that's what the Lions are looking for. Guys like Julian Edelman, more quick than fast, but very productive. And I think that is a player the Detroit Lions could also address, or a position of the offense. A position the Detroit Lions could also address. Wide receiver in the draft, Sharon Peak. He's more of the Mike Wallace type, but he's a big-bodied receiver. Reminds me of a little bit of Brandon Marshall. He shows me a little Brandon Marshall every once in a while. Fast receiver, flying up draft boards. Someone we've talked about repeatedly on this show and on Twitter. Out of Clemson, wide receiver, 6'4", ran a 4.4, tested very well at the combine. Small hands. That's one of the knocks on him. Drops a few balls. But again, can he play that Mike Wallace role where we send him deep 4, 5, 6 times a game, use him in specialty situations? Having a Marvin Jones, an Eric Ebron, a Golden Tate takes the pressure off bringing him in and trying to fill that number 2 role. We don't have to worry about that because we have Marvin Jones. You can bring him in. You have T.J. Jones, who played very well last year. Quicker than fast guy. Understands how to read defenses. Understands how to get open. Understands how to use his body against cornerbacks. Understands how to set plays up, how to set a defender up. Very good, sure-handed receiver that always seems like he's ready to break a play. T.J. Jones is a show favorite. We've been trying to get him on the show. He will not respond to any of our tweets. We're working on it. TJ, I send you the show all the time, bro. Pick up the Twitter handle and at STR Lions Talk Podcast. Come on the show. I'd love to talk to you. I want to talk to you about being the next Lions receiver, taking a commanding role and taking hold of that position. And where do you think you fit? What kind of season do you think you're going to have? That's what we want to know. You were a breakout player last year, and you showed glimpses of it. He's a big play, seems like to me, waiting to happen all the time. Really like T.J. Jones a lot. But getting a guy like Sterling Shepard in the draft at the wide receiver position could be huge for the Detroit Lions. I really like him. I think if you took him in the 3rd round, I don't think you would regret it. We're going to probably get the first compensation pick for losing Sue last year in the 3rd round. I don't know if that's going to be the one that the Kansas City Chiefs had taken away the other day. Possibly could be. That would be sweet because that'd be in the 20 range in the 3rd round. That would be a good get. And taking a Sterling Shepard, a Sean Davis, Jordan Jenkins, linebacker, D-end out of Georgia, guys like that would be so huge. I know a lot of us want to take Dak Prescott and take a quarterback in the 3rd or 2nd round. And here's my quick opinion on that, kind of getting off subject a little bit from the free agent thing. I don't want to take quarterback because there's not a quarterback in this draft, in my opinion, besides Connor Cook, that's worth taking if you need a starter. Now, I wouldn't mind taking Connor Cook. If Connor Cook or Paxton Lynch happen to fall into the 2nd round and he's laying there for the Detroit Lions, I wouldn't be all upset with them drafting Connor Cook or Paxton Lynch in the 2nd round. Do I think we could utilize that pick better on the defensive side of the ball with the defensive gaps we have and some of the age issues we have on the defensive side of the ball? Yes. But if the Paxton Lynch is there, he can sit for 2, 3, 4 years and learn. And if you lose Matthew Stafford in free agency, which I don't think we will, I think we will extend him. I think we'll be ahead of this. I don't think Quinn's going to get caught with his pants down. I think Quinn will be able to slide a folder over to Matthew Stafford upon negotiations for this and say, this is where we're taking the team. This is what we want to do. He'll be able to show him a model of what the Detroit Lions are going to do. I just don't see that the Detroit Lions should try to get this developmental quarterback to take over for Stafford. I mean, we're already kicking Stafford out the door. He's 28. What are we doing? When he gets out of this contract, he'll more than likely be in the prime of his career. And you can see the glimpses and the success Matthew Stafford was having at the end of last year. Will he continue it? I believe he will. He's a top 10 quarterback. We said he'd be a top 10 quarterback. We thought he could possibly sneak into the top 5 range, and the Detroit Lions would have more success because all this success hinges around Matthew Stafford. And bringing in a Dak Prescott doesn't excite me in the third round when you could get a guy like Sterling Shepard. You could get a guy like Jordan Jenkins. You could possibly get a Victor Butler. You could get Sean Davis. You can get a whole variety of player there that we need more than a backup quarterback to Matthew Stafford to sit for 2 years. And then I wouldn't feel comfortable at Dak Prescott taking over in 2 years, even if he sat for 2 years. I still wouldn't feel comfortable about it. But moving on, the Detroit Lions, this is cool. Tahir Whitehead is back with the Detroit Lions. Now, that is a good... Man, I'm glad about that. I was really disappointed in that. I really thought he was going to go to Philadelphia with Jim Schwartz. I really thought he was going to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I didn't think he was actually going to leave Tampa Bay. I thought that's where he was going to end up being. After he left Philadelphia, I thought it was weird because I thought for sure he'd go to Philadelphia under Jim Schwartz, who drafted Tahir Whitehead out of Temple. And him going to Tampa Bay, I really thought he would stay in Tampa Bay, but he came back to the Lions. That's a good get for the Lions. That was just announced. Cool. Excellent. Yes. I'm happy about that. That was an issue the Detroit Lions have, is the linebacker position. Now, does that set up that the Detroit Lions draft Reggie Ragland in the first round? Or do the Detroit Lions still go D-tackle? I think they're still going to go D-tackle. I'm going to stick with Sheldon Rankins. But they still need a middle linebacker. That's a position we could see the Lions address in free agency. I don't know who's really out there at that position for the Detroit Lions and would fit the Detroit Lions and what they want to do that would be effective I'm sure we're not going to spend a huge dollar on that because ultimately, guys, you have to really take into account that we maybe DeAndre Levy's hurt worse than we thought. There's rumors that the hip dislocation was worse than what we had thought it was. It potentially was a Bo Jackson type hip dislocation, and I don't know where he stands right now, but it worries me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It worries me a little bit that DeAndre Levy might be hurt worse than what we're being told, and he might not be the player he was before the injury. So it's a touchy subject. I hope that's not true because he's such a good player and he's so dynamic and he makes our defense better when he's not there. But I think the Detroit Lions should take precautions in that regard, and I think that will be a telling tale about how the draft and free agency goes, where DeAndre Levy's at, depending on what we do to address the depth position at the linebacker spot for the Detroit Lions. Again, Bob Quinn's going to build depth in this free agent period. This free agent period for the Lions is going to stretch like 3 weeks into the draft. You're going to hear, the Detroit Lions signed Kyle Love. The Detroit Lions signed this guy. You're going to be like, who the heck is that? Backup guard for the 49ers. This guy. Backup center for the Eagles. Whatever it's going to be. That's how this free agent period is going to go for the Lions. We said last week, Bob Quinn's not going to go out and be the first one to sign the big name guy. He's not that guy. He takes a scout's approach to this. We've also re-signed Haloti Ngata to a 2-year deal, 2 years, $12 million. I don't know what the statistics are going back to Tahir Whitehead right now. It just came out that he just re-signed with the Detroit Lions. Awesome. That's huge. Like I just said, giddy. But Haloti Ngata in the middle, nose tackle, was a huge, huge gaping hole for the Detroit Lions. Having Con Reed, Gabe Wright, and Tyron Walker. I'm really excited about Tyron Walker. Reached out to him to be on the show. Again, no response back. At least say no. I mean, come on, dude. But Tyron Walker coming back, he was playing very well before he was injured and very hard to block and got better every week until he was injured. So hopefully he can come back. The good thing about his injury was it was just a broken leg. It wasn't torn ligaments. It was just a broken leg. So hopefully he can come back healthy and effective in the same manner he was before he was injured. Tyron Walker is a huge get for the Detroit Lions. We talked about that last week, being the first signing in the Bob Quinn era of a free agent besides that guy, that receiver they signed out of whatever state that was. But Haloti Ngata re-signed with the Detroit Lions at nose tackle position, 2 years, $12 million. It's basically a 1-year deal, but it counts $4 million against the cap, and that ranks it ninth against the cap. And I'm kind of stealing this from Jim Costa on 961 that I don't think he's the ninth best player on the team. If he stays for 2 years, maybe it's not such a bad deal. I don't think it's a 2-year deal. I think it's a 1-year deal with a $4 million cap hit. We brought in a capologist, a guy that's really good with the cap, so I'm hoping this is a 2-year deal. I'm not mad if it's a 2-year deal, and we bring in a guy like maybe a DJ Reader, a Sheldon Rankins, a Jerron Reed, someone like that. Alshon Robinson possibly, I think, is going to slip into the second round. That might be a potential target for the Detroit Lions. We could possibly go Jerron Reed, Alshon Robinson, 2 Alabama players in back-to-back picks. We could go Reggie Ragland, Alshon Robinson, second round. Things like that. Now, if we bring in a guy, DJ Reader, someone like that, he could learn from and develop that player the next 2 years, then yeah, I like the signing. But is this the end? Him being on the wrong side of 30, I think he's 32, going to be 33 going into next year. He was injured a little bit last year. Can he stay healthy? Because he flashed very well, and you saw some of the old Haloti Ngata at the end of last year. Can he stay healthy? Can he get back to where he was and be consistent this next year as he was last year? Can he be the player at the end of last year all the way through the 2016 season for the Detroit Lions? That's what we're hoping for. We're going to need a little luck on that one. I guess I don't mind that one as much. It's okay. I'm not jumping up and down about it, but it does fill a need. It's a veteran player. You couldn't fill all that up with rookies. I wanted to draft about 3 defensive tackles if we weren't going to sign Haloti Ngata. Now I bet we draft 2. I would love to see DJ Reader be one of those with one of our 5th-round picks, because we have 3 5th-round picks. Love to see him in a Detroit Lions uniform if his heart's into playing football. Some concerns there. Again, another guy that tested very well. His pro day is going to be very good. Strong guy. But, the Detroit Lions free agent period so far has been a little slow, and that was to be expected. I didn't think the Detroit Lions were going to be super aggressive with their free agent money. This isn't back in the day when Mayhew and Lawand were there, and we had $15 million to spend, and we restructured every contract on the team to get it up to $20 million, and then had $40 million worth of cap hits. No, this is going to be a scout's approach, like Quinn has done with everything, rebuilding the front office, keeping the coaching staff very thought out, well-rounded ideas on everything he's going to do. Nothing's going to be herky-jerky. He's going to think about all of his decisions. Nothing's going to be done in haste. It's just going to take time. It's a mini rebuild for the Lions, but we have core players. We're still going to be an effective team. We're not going to be the best team. If I was ranking us right now, getting Tahir Whitehead back, Haloti Ngata, Tyron Walker, assuming all those guys are healthy, a healthy DeAndre Levy, Tahir Whitehead, if Kyle Van Noy can start playing better, Darius Slay continues his rise, Quandre Diggs improves, Quinn can still play at the level he's been playing at with the Detroit Lions since signing there. We can find a safety. Maybe the answer is Trayvon Wilson. Possibly. That'd be great. A cheap player that doesn't cost a small fortune, being very productive, outperforming a contract. That'd be a nice thing for the Detroit Lions. Nevin Lawson can play better on the defensive side of the ball, because ultimately this needs to be the Detroit Lions improving that defense. I think that's where Bob Quinn's going to focus a lot of energy in the draft, is on the defensive side of the ball. The New England Patriots, 7 out of the last 8 years, have drafted defense. The New England Patriots have had 55 picks in last 6 years. You can count on Bob Quinn having an average of about 10 picks every year he's with the Detroit Lions. We have 12 currently, counting compensation picks this year. That's what you're going to see from Bob Quinn. This is a real GM. This isn't these guys that we hired, former players that had no scouting experience and no GM experience and didn't know how to run an organization. We're kind of learning on the fly. This isn't the organization it was of a bunch of yes men. I don't think Quinn surrounded himself with yes men. I don't think Kyle O'Brien, not Ken O'Brien, Kyle O'Brien, his right-hand man, is a yes man. I think he's a guy to question Quinn. And you need that when you're in power because you're not always right. But this is how you build a team. Matthew Stafford, everyone can dog Matthew Stafford, but those people out there that think Matthew Stafford should put up video game numbers, 5, 6 touchdowns, 400 yards, all this yardage, all these stats, that's great. Peyton Manning did that for years. Great player, won Super Bowls. But do you really think Peyton Manning won that Super Bowl for the Denver Broncos last year? No. Was he a contributor to the team and effective in certain moments? Yes. And that's what we're looking for Matthew Stafford to be. He's young enough, has a big enough arm. He can be effective, and he can win games when the defense isn't playing well. But it's not fair for everyone out there to think that Matthew Stafford has to be the catalyst for success of the Detroit Lions. And I understand, we said it before, the team only goes as far as Matthew Stafford, but I say that in the context that the defense can actually stop someone on third down. You have to win on third down in the NFL. It's the most important down in the NFL on both sides of the ball. You have to be able to win on third down on defense, and you have to be able to win on third down on offense. The Detroit Lions need that defense beefed up. Look what happened in 2013 when they had a good, 2014 when they had a good defense. Look how well Matthew Stafford played, not having to be the man. He can make the last minute drive. We've seen it. He's done it probably 15, 20 times as a Lion. Last minute drive. He's great at the no huddle. But imagine surrounding him with a dominant defense again. But a dominant defense year after year. Not this dominant one year, terrible the next. Great one year, terrible the next. No, not the roller coaster defense, but consistently dominant, like the Patriots. They're always good on defense. The Ravens, always good on defense. Steelers, always good on defense. The Steelers changed philosophies last year. I said they were going to be terrible. I'm on record on the show saying, man, do you see the Steelers? Holy crap. They're playing that stupid Tampa 2. It won't work. Well, they got better throughout the year. Good coaching. I think we have that. Terrell Austin, good defensive coach. I think Terrell Austin is not going to be hired as a head coach, and that's good for the Detroit Lions. Unless this defense really improves next year, I think his time has kind of run out. I think he'll get another opportunity, but I don't think he's going to be the hot name again next year. And that's good for us. I want coaches to stick around for a while. Look what he's done with the secondary in Detroit. Our secondary is something you don't really have to worry about. It's something I like to address. I'd like to see us get maybe Cyrus Jones, Alabama cornerback. Again, I don't like Alabama cornerbacks, but Cyrus Jones is going to be a very, very good cornerback in this league. He's one of my favorite players, someone I fell in love with during the Combine, and I researched him, and I think he's going to be a great player for the Detroit Lions. But with that said, that's the end of our show. That's where we stand on free agency. Not a lot of moves. The Detroit Lions are still working. It's going to be a drawn-out process. They're not going to spend all their money. Let's hope they can re-sign some of their own guys, potentially Devin Taylor, potentially Darius Slay, potentially Ziggy Ansah, and hopefully extend Matthew Stafford before it's too late. Again, we just said Matthew Stafford can't be the all-everything for the team on a weekly basis, including playoffs. They need a defense and surround and make a complete team around him, but he is effective enough to be a championship quarterback in our mind at Straight Lions Talk. We believe it. I've believed it the whole time. I love Matthew Stafford. He's the best quarterback the Detroit Lions have ever had. He's a top 10 quarterback in this league, easily. I mean, the Rams put a first-round tender on Case freaking Keenum. That's where we could be. And it'd be foolish to let Matthew Stafford go. So extending guys with the money we have, getting out in front of this, being proactive, not reactive, is going to be key for the Detroit Lions, and I believe Bob Quinn will do that. So please tune in next week. I'm sure there'll be more free agent news. Again, it was just announced the Detroit Lions are keeping Tahir Whitehead. So follow us on iTunes, on Stitcher. Subscribe to us so this automatically comes to you every week. All this Lions information we just gave you in the last 54 minutes. We went 15 minutes longer than we were supposed to, but a lot of information to get to, a lot of stuff to talk about. We don't mind. We love it. We love having you guys join us. So please join us every week by subscribing to us. Leave us a message whether you like the show or not. Follow us on Twitter at STR Lions Talk. We will see you next week.